US President Donald Trump issued an order on March 15, 2025 for a series of massive US military attacks against the Houthi terrorists in Yemen who are supported by Iran. Trump called the Houthis' persistent attacks on shipping in the Red Sea a crucial maritime route, an unrelenting campaign of piracy, violence, and terrorism against American and other ships, prompting these strikes. The USS Georgia cruise missile submarine assisted the USS Harry S. Truman carrier strike group in the operation, which targeted Houthi bases, leaders, missile defenses, radars, and drone systems throughout Yemen, including the capital Sana'a. From his Trump International Golf Club in West Palm Beach, Florida, Trump made the announcement on social media promising to deploy overwhelming lethal force until the Houthis stopped attacking. No terrorist force will stop American commercial and naval vessels from freely sailing in the waterways of the world, he said, emphasizing the need to preserve American ships and restore navigational freedom. In contrast to Biden administration's pathetically weak response, Trump claimed that strikes were the first significant US military action against the Houthis during his second term in office. Trump also signaled a broader willingness to challenge Iran's regional power by directly ordering Iran, the Houthis' main patron, to immediately stop supporting the organization or suffer terrible repercussions. In response, the Houthis promised to strike again. On March 16, their military spokesperson declared that they would use drones and ballistic missiles to attack USS Harry S. Truman group, but US sources said the attack was unsuccessful. Earlier that week, the Houthis threatened to relaunch assaults on ships connected to Israel, but no such attacks had taken place prior to the start of US strikes. The military escalation followed their threat. Trump's strong approach is evident in the operation, which builds on his January 2025 decision to reclassify the Houthis as foreign terrorist organization, reversing Biden-era ruling. Depending on how the Houthis and Iran respond, US sources said that campaign might last for weeks. Now, it is important that Trump controls the Houthis as they are causing huge economic losses for world economies due to their blockades of ships, except for China and Russia. So it is for the benefit of the world itself that Trump does something about Houthi terrorism. Now let's have a look at the Iranians and what they are doing to support the Houthis. By aiding the Houthi rebels, officially known as Ansar Allah, in their fight against internationally recognized Yemeni government and its supporters, especially Saudi Arabia as well as United States, Iran plays a crucial role in the country's affairs. This backing is a component of Iran's larger plan to confront its so-called adversaries, challenge Western interests, and increase its influence in the Middle East. A key component of Iran's aim is to increase its influence throughout the Middle East with the provision of weapons, mostly to proxy terror groups such as Houthi rebels in Yemen and Hezbollah in Lebanon. Advanced drones like Qasaf-1 and Shahid 136, as well as ballistic missiles like Houthi used Burkan 2H, which is a replica of Iran's Fateh 110, are among the weaponry offered. Iran also provides these organizations with small armaments such as assault rifles and millions of rounds of ammunition and anti-ship missiles, which allow them to efficiently target enemies and maintain protracted confrontations. Iran's geopolitical might has increased as a result of this armament, which has turned the local insurgencies into serious regional threats. The Houthis receive modern weapons from Iran like ballistic missiles, drones, and anti-ship missiles, as well as financial support and military training. Iranian involvement in the provision of these weapons, which are frequently smuggled over the Arabian Sea or through middlemen like Iran's Lebanese affiliate Hezbollah, has been proved by US and Saudi officials as well as independent observers. The Houthis' capacity to use advanced drones and missiles, such as those they employed in March 16, 2025 response against USS Harry S. Truman, for example, is a reflection of technology found in Iran's arsenal and that of its other terrorist proxies. Iran claims that the Houthis operate autonomously and denies any direct cooperation predictably, but intelligence assessments and intercepted supplies provide proof of consistent pattern of tactical and logistical support. Iran supports the Houthis politically in order to encircle Saudi Arabia, its principal regional enemy, project power in Arabian Peninsula, and obstruct vital shipping lanes including the Red Sea and Bab al-Mandab Strait. The Houthis are a crucial instrument in Tehran's axis of resistance network, which also include terrorist organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah, because of their anti-American and anti-Israeli rhetoric is consistent with Iran's ideological objectives. Following the Houthis' 2014 takeover of Sana'a, which sparked the current civil war, this backing grew stronger as the group's attack on the region and shipping targets intensified. Responses to Iran's role have been harsh, as evidenced by March 15, 2025 statement in response to airstrikes on Houthi targets. The United States has explicitly warned Iran to cease its support during Trump's second term with severe consequences if it persists. Leading a coalition against the Houthis since 2015, Saudi Arabia also sees Iran's role as a major factor in the crisis and charges Tehran with escalating Yemen's instability. With hundreds of thousands killed and millions homeless, Iran's support has transformed a local insurgency into a regional proxy war with catastrophic human consequences. But the Houthis are more than just puppets. They have local origins, especially against the Saudis and the Yemeni government. Besides, no terror group can grow without local populations' support. This has been proven around the world, especially in places like Kashmir and other pro-Islamic regions as well. As seen by their autonomous choices, like as the threatened strikes on ships with ties to Israel in March 2025, Iran's assistance enhances their capabilities but does not entirely control their behavior. However, they wouldn't be able to maintain such a long and technologically complex campaign without Iran's assistance either. The volume is substantial enough to support a war for 10 years, even though precise amounts are difficult to determine because the supply is covered. The use of drones and ballistic missiles in the Houthis' March 2025 attack on Harry S. Truman ship demonstrates how Iran's assistance has emboldened them from a small militia into a regional menace. According to US officials, Iran spends tens of millions of dollars a year on Houthis, which is significant amount considering the upheaval in Yemen, but a small portion of their larger proxy budget. This supply is in line with Iran's low-cost, high-impact strategy of arming proxy terror groups to subdue enemies like the United States and Saudi Arabia without going to all-out war. This, coincidentally, is the same tactic that Pakistan uses against India. Additionally, it obstructs important trade routes, increasing Iran's power. The Houthis, however, modify these weapons to suit regional requirement, indicating some degree of autonomy in their application. These weapons are delivered using secret and advanced techniques to get over international sanctions and arms embargoes. Iran mostly employs small boats to smuggle weapons from its ports to places like Houthi-controlled portions of Yemen via maritime channels across the Arabian Sea. In addition, overland connections via nations like Oman are important, and middlemen like Hezbollah offer training and logistical support. As demonstrated by intercepted shipments such as 2023 collection of more than 2,000 weapons and 1.2 million rounds headed for Houthis, which was discovered by US and Saudi forces, front corporations and third-party entities further complicate Iran's participation. Now let's have a look at the economic toll of Houthi terrorism. Now for India, these attacks are quite costly. The Houthi attacks on Red Sea shipping since late 2023 have disrupted India's economy by rerouting 95% of its $14 billion monthly trade with Europe via the Suez Canal around the Cape of Good Hope, spiking freight costs, squeezing exporter margins on goods like rice and textiles by an estimated $30 billion annually, raising oil import costs from Russia with the potential $10 to 20 per barrel hikes due to longer routes and 15 to 20% higher insurance, threatening $120 billion in Gulf remittance if regional stability falters and prompting naval deployments. All the while, India balances diplomacy with Iran and Gulf allies, facing manageable short-term pain but risk of deeper trade and energy shocks if disruptions persist into late 2025. Analysis suggests shipping costs have jumped up to 40 to 60%, with some exporters holding consignments waiting out the chaos. The government is watching closely. Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal said in December 2024 exports dodged the bullet but prolonged volatility could sting. India is not joined the US-led Operation Prosperity Guardian, balancing ties with Iran and Gulf allies, which adds a diplomatic twist as well. So short term it is manageable for India, but it is still painful with higher costs, tighter margins. However, long term, if this things drags into late 2025, we are looking at a bigger trade losses, energy price shocks, and maybe even a rethink of India's supply chain strategy. Data is still unfolding, but the ripple is very real. Regionally, Egypt has been hit hard, losing up to 66% of Suez Canal revenue, that is about $6 to $7 billion annually, or a quarter of its foreign currency earnings, exacerbating its economic woes amid the Gaza crisis. Gulf states reliant on maritime energy exports, that is 40 to 50% of GDP for Saudi Arabia, Qatar and Kuwait, avoid escalation to protect their trade, while the Houthi strategy gives competitive edges to nations like China, whose ships often pass unchecked. An extended closure of Suez might raise world inflation by 0.18 to 0.23 percentage points in 2024-25, according to 2024 projection by the Center for Economic Policy Research. I mean, it sounds small, but it is a huge raise when it comes to inflation. With companies like Marks and Spencer reporting delays in spring collections and additional prices that may be passed on to customers, Europe, which is largely dependent on Suez for Asian imports, bears the brunt of the problem. Despite being less reliant on Red Sea routes, the United States nevertheless experiences effects in industries like chemicals, clothing, where companies like Target and Walmart must deal with reduced profit margins or price increases. Houthi attacks on Red Sea shipping, escalating since November 2023, disrupt 12 to 15% of global maritime trade, including 30% of container shipping and key oil and gas flows. Shipping costs have doubled or tripled as firms reroute around the Cape of Good Hope, adding 10 to 14 days and spiking fuel, crew and insurance expenses. War risk premiums alone have soared from 0.01 to 1%. The trade losses are estimated at $200 to $350 billion annually, with supply chain delays fueling inflation risk. Europe faces higher consumer costs, while the US sees milder impacts. Energy markets remain stable despite threats to 9 million barrels daily, though Egypt loses $6 to $7 billion in Suez revenue yearly. US military response cost millions, potentially billions, adding to the economic toll. The attacks strain global trade without breaking it, benefiting China and to an extent Russia as well, whose ships are often spared. Now, what we can gather from all this data is that although there are still obstacles to overcome, international efforts to stop Iran's arms proliferation has been strong. While military efforts like the March 2025 US airstrikes on Houthi targets aim to dissuade further escalation, accompanied by explicit warnings of severe consequences for Iran, the United States has applied sanctions to cripple Iran's ability to fund and export weapons. Targeting Iran's supply routes, Saudi Arabia has been at the forefront of a coalition against the Houthis since 2015, which coincidentally saw the rise of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Diplomatic actions like as the US redesignating the Houthis as terrorist organization during Trump's second term aimed to isolate Tehran completely. Iran's secret networks and tenacity allow it to continue supplying weapons in spite of these constraints, making attempts to limit its influence more difficult. Although interceptions by themselves haven't completely stopped the flow, the US reaction, which includes Trump's recent airstrikes and threats to Iran, is in a way working to discourage it. Despite the possibility of wider escalation, Iran's stubbornness, which is typical to most Islamist regimes, shows its dedication to the Houthis as a strategic asset. Hopefully, Trump can rein in Houthis as well as Iran and other terrorist groups like Hamas and Hezbollah, because people most of the time doesn't see the larger implications and the economic toll on the world democracies. So it is important that America and to an extent Europe as well step up, because Europe is the biggest loser in all of this, yet they are making US do its dirty work. I want Europe to spend more on its defense and potentially NATO do more with regard to terror groups, to handle them better. Anyway, let's hope that Trump will rein them in, and I feel it will take EU a bit more time, to rally themselves up and rise to the occasion, as US is looking to a more isolated way of dealing with Europe and the rest of the world.